Hey everyone, it's Kenji. We're gonna make some eggplant parm. Real like old school style. So only 4 real ingredients here. I guess 5. So eggplants, mozzarella, basil, tomatoes, and olive oil. I'm gonna start with the olive oil. I got a couple other things going over here. You can ignore them for now. Eggplant parm. This is different from the American version, which has, where your eggplant is sort of breaded. If you look at in my book, The Food Lab, I have a recipe where the eggplant is breaded and fried, which is sort of the more traditional Italian-American version. This is more the real traditional Southern Italian version, which is just eggplants that are fried in olive oil and then layered with cheese and sauce. We're going to do just mozzarella. I might add some Parmesan in here also. I like to use these smaller eggplants. I find them a little bit easier to slice. They tend to be less seedy than the bigger eggplants. All that said, you can use really whatever eggplants you like. The big Globe Italian eggplants work fine. You just might need a bigger pan to fry them in. All right, so we're going to start by slicing these up. Some people will tell you you gotta purge your eggplants. You gotta salt them and let them rest in that salt so that you pull out any sort of bitter juices, so-called bitter juices. Modern eggplants, I don't find them to be particularly bitter. I don't think I've ever had an eggplant that I ate it and I was just like, oh man, this is too bitter for me. And certainly I have never found that purging them makes a difference as far as their bitterness goes. It can make them a little bit easier to fry. But what I find is that if you've got a good skillet, a good pan, oops, we should get our heat on, a good pan, like this one, this is this is the one that my podcast mate, Deb Perlman, she partnered with Staub to make this little brazier, but it doesn't stick as long as you let the eggplants kind of sit in there long enough to brown, yeah, they're going to lose their moisture anyway, so I find that salting can help you do the frying step faster, but the trade-off is that you have to wait for the salt to pull out the liquid, which, can take a good amount of time. All right, so the way I do this, I like to work in batches, so I'm going to fry the eggplant over there. I'm going to grab this skillet for us to layer our eggplants in as they go, and meanwhile I'm going to set my oven to bake. 375. And as those eggplant slices fry, I'm gonna take out my tomatoes, start working on those. These tomatoes I'm using, they're Bianco di Napoli, American grown, San Marzano style tomatoes. They're made by, they're a brand started by Chris Bianco, who is, as my friend Ed Levine calls him, the poet laureate of pizza. Pizzeria Bianco in Phoenix. There's a location in LA also. He's a Brooklyn boy who moved to Phoenix to make real good pizza. All right, so I'm gonna take tomatoes. I always get whole canned tomatoes. The reason being that if you buy diced tomatoes or if you buy tomato puree, oftentimes what you'll find is that there's an ingredient, calcium chloride, in the tomatoes, and that helps those diced tomatoes sort of keep their shape in the can. It helps keep pectin from breaking down. However, it'll also keep those tomatoes from breaking down in a sauce. So I find whole peeled tomatoes always end up having better texture in the long run than canned diced tomatoes. And they also sort of allow you to really adjust the size of your tomato puree at the end, whether you want it nice and chunky like I'm going to do, or a finer puree. So I'm using a pastry cutter here. This is a tool you would use to cut butter into pastry. If you're making a pie crust, something like that. But I find that it's real good for this application as well. All right, they're doing okay. So they're going to start by sort of sucking up some oil, and then you'll see as they slowly cook, that oil is going to get kind of expressed back out. I'm gonna put a little weight on these guys. I'm using a chef's press. You can use a pot lid, something like that, if you want, or you can just let it go on its own, and they will eventually lose all their moisture, even if you don't press them out like this. But pressing in kind of speeds up the process a little bit. The only other thing I'll do is salt these tomatoes. Let's give it a stir and a taste. Yep, salt level's good. I'm gonna add some of these to this. There's some leftover. I had some leftover carnitas that I'm turning into like a black bean chili because my daughter, who is a vegetarian, makes exceptions for two things: chili and dumplings. She loves chili. All right, we're looking good. Got some pretty decent browning going on. So, you know, in some dishes, the the oil is there to allow you to brown things more evenly. You know, if you're sautéing some vegetables, the oil is there really as a means of more efficiently browning them. You know, bringing as sort of a heat conductor. In this dish, in eggplant parmesan, the oil is a really essential flavor component. So the oil soaks into the eggplant. You know, eggplants are very spongy, and so the oil is going to soak into there, give them a really nice creamy texture and a really nice flavor. So it's important to use good olive oil for this. You don't want to use something like you know, flavorless like a canola oil. Good olive oil. This doesn't have, you know, when you're frying, it doesn't have to be your very best extra virgin olive oil. We'll save some of that for the end. But you know, a good everyday extra version that you're happy to cook with is going to give it a lot of nice flavor. Yeah. All right. We'll let that go. This is going to take a few minutes, so I'll be back in a few minutes. All right. So our eggplant. Nice and browned on both sides. And as the pieces sort of finish cooking, as each one sort of finishes, I'm going to start placing it in the baking container. And as you go, you don't need to wait for all of those to cook before you start the next batch. You can go right ahead and add in some more eggplant. You know, I find this is sort of the most efficient way to do it. You just kind of, as the eggplant cooks, as the eggplant soaks up the oil, you can add a little more oil. And as the eggplant cooks, you pull it out and add more eggplant. We're going over a sort of medium-low heat here, by the way. Eggplant parm is my daughter's other favorite dish. I suppose chili is not her favorite thing, but she really loves chili. But eggplant parm is something the whole family digs on. All right. We're gonna layer our tomato on there. Tomato, by the way, this is a cast iron skillet, but tomato and cast iron is totally fine so long as your cast iron is kind of well seasoned the way this one is. And I'm gonna do mozzarella in kind of chunks like this. You can do, you know, completely fresh mozzarella if you want, or you can do an aged mozzarella, you know, like a low moisture mozzarella, pizza cheese if you want, whichever you prefer. You know, low moisture mozzarella is going to tend to be kind of a little more flavorful and a little bit sort of stretchier and gooier. I'd say gooier, not stretchier. Fresh mozzarella is going to be kind of stretchier, whereas low moisture mozzarella is going to be a little bit gooier. But it's really your choice. And then I'm also going to do some basil. Oops, I did mean to season that eggplant with a little salt. Second layer of eggplant kind of softens up. We're going to start adding it to our skillet here as well. You know, if you, like me, thought when you were a kid that you just didn't like eggplant, it's probably because you were not frying it with enough olive oil. Because when there's enough olive oil, it's like, I don't know, I find undeniably delicious. No, deniably delicious. I get some people just don't like things, but there's a good chance that I think that you were just not having it in a delicious enough way when you were a child. And you should give it another shot. I have not met a kid yet that doesn't like eggplant parm made this way, or eggplant fried in olive oil like this. That's probably a lie also. I probably have met a kid, but I haven't met a kid who I've fed this to who did not like it. One more tomato. It's a real rustic, like, you know, you don't have to be too careful when you're layering this all. As long as everything kind of gets squished down into the dish. And as long as there's no kind of bare eggplant at the top, you want the sauce to be kind of coating everything between layers at least. You're going to be good. All right, let's grab a little more mozz. Mozzarella, mozzarella, gonna eat some mozzarella. My basic rule for eggplant is if it looks thirsty, give it a drink. You know, it's kind of my rule for sautéing any vegetables. If they start to look dry in the pan, give them a little more oil. And see, these guys are starting to look a little bit dry to me, which means I'm going to add another drizzle. All right, at this point, I think I can shut off the heat and just let the residual heat of that nice heavy pan do the rest of the work for me. That eggplant's nice and soft. So when your eggplant is done, you should be able to, by the way, just kind of like push through it, you know, and it should feel like it gives, like it doesn't have much elasticity to it, as a sign that it's done. You know, if you push it and it kind of holds the indentation, doesn't pop right back, that's what you're looking for. Let's finish with the last layer of sauce. By sauce, I really just mean, you know, these real nice canned tomatoes. A bit of salt. Finish up with a final level. We're going to beat the boss by adding some mozzarella. Final layer of mozzarella. And this one we're not going to cover with sauce. We'll just let it sit on the top and kind of bubble and brown a little. A layer of pre-oven parm. And we'll finish it off with a layer of post-oven parm as well. Okay, now this is going to go into the oven in 375. And we're gonna let it bake in there for about half an hour. All right, so, you know, it's real forgiving. You can go probably less time or more time, depending on how brown you want it. And, well, I'm gonna finish it with some post-oven parm, some pop, give it a little pop. I always like to do pre-oven and post-oven parm. A little post-oven basil, some pob, as it were. A little bit of post-oven olive oil. Povu. This is where you want to reserve your, you know, your real nice olive oil. All right, so at this point, ideally you would let it rest just until the eggplant is sort of set. You know, you don't want to eat it while the eggplant's like too liquidy. That said, I'm going to try some right now, and the rest I'm going to let sit until tomorrow, and then I'll reheat it for my kids at dinner. All right, let's see what we got, huh? Oof. Bright, fresh, cheesy, delicious. It's so much more. It's so much lighter than you know. It's not a light dish by any means, but it's much lighter than your sort of Italian American style eggplant parm, because it doesn't have that breading layer. You know, you really get the flavor. The flavor of the olive oil and the eggplant first and foremost, I think. Well, the basil, but the eggplant, you know, eggplant I find to have like almost like a spiciness to it. You know, it's a little bit spicy, a little bit bitter, very slightly bitter, but it's kind of sweet and spicy and has a real nice aroma, especially when it's soaked in olive oil like this. Man, all right, eggplant parm. We fry the eggplant in plenty of olive oil. If it starts to look dry, we add more olive oil. I don't bother purging it. I just fry it slowly in olive oil with a little bit of pressure. As the eggplant slices cook, I layer them into a pan like this. You can also use a casserole dish. Fresh canned tomatoes, real good quality canned tomatoes. I use Bianco di Napoli, but any good quality canned tomato is going to work. Like a DOP San Marzano will work with a little bit of salt in it. And then you layer it with some fresh or some low moisture mozzarella, aged mozzarella, a little bit of parm at the end, some fresh basil. Bake it 375 degrees for half an hour, and then finish it with some more Parmesan and olive oil, and that's it. All right, guys, gals, non-binary pals, eggplant Parmesan. See you next time. Bye-bye.